So what I wanted to do is run through the process of making the bacteria kind of in simulation, because I didn't know if they were like building codes or health codes or something, the boiling water in a crowd or whatever. I thought we'd be out there doing all this. So what we're going to do is we're going to brew purple non-sulfur bacteria. They're anaerobic phototrophs, perform photosynthesis, but they live in an anaerobic environment. There's actually 3 PNSB in this species, and in this product. And we chose the 3 big species that are used in like the finfish and shellfish industries. So that we call them the big 3. It's Rhodopseudomonas, Rhodobacter, Rhodospirillum. And it's basically with this kit you're making PNS ProBio, which is our flagship product. So if someone was to try to keep continuing growing this, obviously one species would eventually outcompete the other, right? So what we do is we grow all 3 separately, and then we put them together at the time of bottling when they're in their stationary growth phase. So the inoculum you get and are about to see is basically in a stable state where all 3 species are kind of in equilibrium. But yeah, you'll actually produce 3 purple non-sulfur bacteria species for this product. The first thing you'd probably want to do if you got the kit was check to make sure, this one doesn't have one because it was meant to be open, but we have a little seal here now, and that's just to ensure that someone hasn't gone through here and tried to take out like the inoculum or whatever. These are actually sold in stores now. Ingredients are listed right in the front, so that's the first thing I would check. Get everybody out, and next thing is always read through the instructions. Like before you do anything, we've had people put the inoculum in instead of the growth medium into the boiling water. Yeah. So I've had people, you know, we put hot water into the cube. That's part of the sterilization process. But then people have put the inoculum right into the hot. They sterilized it, but then put the bacteria into the hot. So it's like, yeah, you want to make sure you read through everything first, so you have everything in your head ready to go step by step, including your materials. I'll let you take over from here, but you can just pull everything out, the cube, and pull that apart. And first thing you'd need is, so you'll notice we have 2 spigots in there, or actually a cap and a spigot. The cap is generally what you're going to want to use when you put the batch together, because it's just easier to handle that way, and the spigot can break. So we save that for last, and then for people who want to use it, particularly those who use small amounts, it's really easy to dispense small amounts that way through that little, I mean, we're talking just like drops at a time if that's what you want. And just as a side note, like anytime you use the spigot, when you open or close it, I like, before and after, I like to sterilize it. So I'll spray something that can kill spores like peroxide up there before and after, but especially after, to rinse it all out, and then you don't have icky stuff growing in the nozzle, which can pollute your whole culture then. I also like to put out all the stuff. So we're going to have a funnel, we're going to have a stirrer, all this stuff. I think the easiest way to deal with it when you have it on the table is to like sterilize a plate or something where you can lay it all on there. That way you can take your peroxide, spray the plate down really well, and then you have a sterile place to lay all that stuff, right? So that helps prevent contamination just while you're working, in the process of putting the culture together. So we'll just pretend we have a plate here right now for that. Oh, and just make sure you're clean, obviously. Like, don't come in right after you were doing some like gardening or whatever. And generally we recommend wearing like all the stuff you'd wear in a lab. So you get a mask, definitely gloves, apron, everything but, and I should have brought them, we wear them in our facility, the little booties. A few of you are going to have that at home anyway, and that's okay as long as you don't stick your feet in the kettle. Generally the stuff you really need you're going to have. That is nice to have. Lastly, just if you have sleeves, roll them up, put your hair back, all that stuff. Anything that can shake any kind of bugs into your culture. To the ire of my employee, like before he even passes the door, he's already like dousing himself in Purell, and we have the booties. We have shoes that you can only wear in the facility. Yeah, we have a lot more to lose there too. So yeah, we have air sterilization and yeah, kind of the full 9 yards, or as much as you can in an environment like that. So that, you know, this is like agricultural quality. We're making agricultural grade bacteria. We're not working under hoods with like plates and all that stuff, right? So presumably these will never be like pure cultures, but we just want to keep as much junk out of them as possible. So yeah, just even things like I mentioned here in an uncluttered, draft-free, dust-free area. Like, you know, don't go to like the darkest corner of your garage where like there's, you know, potting soil and, you know what I mean? Try to like work in a clean area, because even the air contains tons of contaminants. So hence the mask, for example, and stuff like that. Just anything that you can do to help keep junk out of there will improve the success, right? Because whatever gets in there will compete with the good stuff for nutrients and so forth. So we got our water boiling, theoretically. Let's run it for fun, the actual timer. But that'll keep me on track too. I'll know when people start leaving that I overstayed my welcome. But so while this is boiling, that's usually a good time to get everything out and sterilized. I don't like to sterilize everything right away, because in the time that it's sitting there, you know, the peroxide, for example, might be evaporating off. And so I try to do all that right before. Anytime you're about to use something, I usually give it another spray. Boiling, but the cube we use bleach, because bleach can kill spores pretty effectively, and it's inexpensive. So we use the bleach, we pour that in the cap, and
do you want me to be doing this?
yeah, let's look full on, yeah, like, why not? And well, I wouldn't necessarily open it though, because there might be like some wetness in there, yeah, not, but we actually pour it into the cap to sterilize the cap, in this case simulating. The actual cap.
Oh, right
And,
here?
yeah, and that way we get the threads and everything in there as well, right? So that's how you get measure your cap full and sterilize the cap. You can just pour that right into the cube, and then about a cup of water. I say sterilized water because I'm just being picky, and you never know what kind of water people are going to use, but obviously tap water is okay for this because it'll be sterile, right? So we slosh that around really well, and you also want to give it some contact time, especially spores will take a while, maybe 10 minutes, but we've got 10 minutes on this anyway to boil. It's probably a good time to mention too, I have 10 minutes of a boil on the list, but that'll probably change to 15 just to be on the safe side. 10 minutes is okay, especially like if it's under like a little bit of pressure, but in some cases, some types of real tough spores can actually survive 10 minutes of boiling under pressure even. So just to make sure if you go over, I wouldn't worry about it, I'd put it that way, but that's the one thing that will change on here in the future, I think, is a 15-minute boil once we put our stuff in there, by the way. Right now we're just bringing this up to a boil. So we got the bleach in there, that basically sterilizes the inside of the vessel. The one thing I think some people are tempted to do this because they're concerned that the bleach will hurt the culture. Don't be. By the time you pour that out of there, you're really just gonna have like a drop or two. That really isn't gonna hurt anything. There's so little in there to react with there's a crazy amount of organic matter and stuff. It's better not to rinse it out, especially with tap water, because tap water is full of bugs. Some of them are usually tough bugs, like sporiform bacteria that will easily survive in there after you. So do not wash the bleach out, just pour it out. And those last few drops, you can kind of shake them, and then you're good to go. Just get the cap right back on it. And again, anytime you have the cap off, set it on that plate that you've pre-sterilized, just to avoid contact with anything that might be contaminated. Yeah, when you get to the point of where the water's boiling, you can add the culture medium. We won't actually pour that in there though. And there you go. By the way, the cube is a 2.5 gallon cube, but we do 3 gallons, partly because you're going to lose some water to evaporation and all that. And the cube can actually hold a little more than that, and that way we'll have a nice bulgy. Everything is kind of made to assume we were going to have this excess amount, so you'll get somewhere between 2.5 and 3 gallons in the end. So that'll treat at least 3,200 gallons, I believe. Anyway, yeah, you get the 10 minutes in heat. Would recommend stirring it. And
Once or periodically through while it's...
just kind of periodically, yeah. Most of the stuff in there is pretty soluble, though there is one ingredient. It's more like a mineral ingredient, so we'll say it's done. That kind of likes to stick to the bottom. It's okay if a little bit does. It's almost like gritty, sandy stuff that'll really want to sink. So that's the stuff, like if you don't get it all out, that's okay, because we put in kind of an excess in there to account for that. But yeah, the one thing I would recommend that we didn't really do is make sure you get the temperature right when you pour it in here too, because you don't want to pour it in too hot. So something like this will work well, and I would just use this carefully placed prop as an opportunity to remind you want to sterilize everything that goes in there. So again, with the peroxide, spray the whole thing before you even check the temp, and make sure it's right around there, because these will melt, the cube will melt. It's much higher than that. We get it in there about as hot as we know we can, because that's part of the sterilization process. But when you funnel it, sometimes what we do, because this could be a lot for someone to try to funnel into a cube, I would, because the cube gets soft when it's hot as well, so it might want to kind of fold up and do weird things. And you don't want to be struggling with your cube at that time, because you're trying to do everything in a sterile manner. So I would either put the cube like in a small box so it can't like crumble. And another thing to do is have a separate container that you can put the boiling water into. We're talking about the medium now. The medium's boiled, but we're going to be pouring it into here. And that way you don't have to pick up like this whole big hot kettle and manage that. You can pour that into something smaller, pre-sterilized of course. You'd spray that all out with the peroxide. But then you could use that to pour through the funnel. The funnel I brought today's kind of got a wimpy little nozzle on it, but if you could find something that's closer to 1 inch, that'll work better, because it'll flow faster through here. Often what we do, like the reason I have so many different sterilizers, by the way, is bleach is good for some things, whereas like peroxide or isopropyl alcohol could be better for others. Like the peroxide, for example, is very strong at, that's really good at killing spores. So that's why we like to sterilize our implements with that, and it's easy to spray. However, the isopropyl is less harmful to the bacteria. However, it's less harmful to all bacteria. So if we were using isopropyl alone, for example, it's not very sporicidal. So we couldn't be sure we killed all the spores. Especially, 70% is ideal. Like, we actually water down our 99% in the facility, because that's less lethal actually, because it doesn't penetrate the spore as easily. As 70% is ideal. But the reason we use the isopropyl then is if we're using peroxide to spray down the lid, for example, right before you put it on, we'll use the isopropyl to spray out that peroxide right before you cap it. And that way you're spraying off if that makes sense. You're really just using a sterile product to wipe off another sterile product, but this one's less harmful to the bacteria. At this point you would have your culture in here. It should be kind of like a greenish color because of the vitamins, and it almost looks like Mountain Dew or that kind of color when it's inside the culture vessel and lit up. The big thing to do when you're done is just make sure, like if you spilled anything, hopefully you don't with the funnel. I strongly recommend not for biosecurity's sake, but if you spill anything by accident on the edges, just go ahead and spray that off as well. You can use probably peroxide for that, because now we're not getting anything inside the culture, right? That means more to protect it later in case something starts growing on the outside around the cap or whatever that can find its way in later. As I mentioned, first make sure it's down to room temp, or I guess the target temp, which is going to be around 30 C, and then you can inoculate. As before, make sure everything's sprayed down with peroxide, including this cap and your hands. And then very carefully, after you open this up, pour it in very slowly to make sure you don't spill around the edge of the mouth of the culture vessel.
because those could become sites of contamination. And then one other thing too, when you open this, make sure you're pulling up on this collar a little bit when you open it. That way it won't collapse on itself and spill stuff out. So just kind of pull this up, open the cap, set the cap down on a sterile surface. Just make sure nothing touches something that can contaminate. Once you get the inoculum poured in, of course, just put the cap back on immediately, and then you're ready to get it under some light.
Now you can just set it aside to incubate. And the incubation process could be sometimes less than 30 days. They vary a lot in that regard. So it depends on temperature more than anything else. These guys require light for fast growth. You can actually live without light altogether. But if you put the ideal light on them, you'll get the best results and fastest results because they are photosynthetic. We recommend a 60 to 65 watt incandescent if you can still find those anywhere. They love incandescents. But if you can't, like the 60 to 65 watt equivalent LED works just fine too. We like the warmer rather than cooler spectra for those. And generally you'll just put them like right up on the culture. Something like this is a 60 watt, so I might put this a little closer than I would a 65 watt. Something like this, I'd put it right up on it. And what you might see, you'll see biofilms after a few weeks starting to grow right up on the light. So you know that you're not giving them too much light. But this is one really important point. Like some people think that more is better with regard to light in these guys. And I have people put like Kessels or like grow lights for like weed or something on them. And yeah, it's like they don't like really bright light. What will happen is they will, well, it's not that they don't like it, it's just that it'll photo inhibit them if you go really crazy. But even if you go a little over the line, they'll produce less carotenoid because they're photosynthetic. They use the carotenoids and their bacterial chlorophylls to harvest light. And if they don't need as much of it, they're not going to waste as much energy making it, right? It's pretty simple. So if they have really bright light, they're just going to produce less of it. It's kind of like where you see like low light plants where they'll yellow, produce less chlorophyll if they're in too bright of light, right? So I would strongly suggest not over illuminating them. In many cases, people think they failed where they actually did quite well in terms of like cell density, right? They're just not seeing the dark colors in the end because the cells that are there were less pigmented, if that makes sense. So, and that's some of that's really one of the biggest goodnesses of these bacteria are the carotenoids. Astaxanthin, for example, is almost worth its weight in gold, but it's the antioxidant and coloring properties that make these guys so nutritious, really, and so valuable as compared to a lot of other foods. I mean, they're around like 70% protein. That's pretty good for like picoplankton or some kind of like, liquid food. But yeah, it's the pigments are where it's at. So you want to just give them that modest lighting and make them really have to produce a lot of those carotenoids to capture the light that they want. But lighting isn't even the most important thing. It's temperature. You're definitely going to want them to be at like around 83, 84 degrees Fahrenheit. If there's one thing that'll make these guys grow slowly or poorly, it's being too cool. They're very thermophilic. You want them to be very warm. In some cases I've seen, I think our filmographer here today has done it this way. Did you grew one of these kind of by putting them in a box, right? Where it insulated? So yeah, especially if you use an incandescent bulb, they generate so much heat that you might be able to keep it that warm. But really we recommend like a heat pad. So these like mild heat pads for like seedlings or something work great. They're super cheap and they're more reliable, particularly if you get a thermostat, which we also recommend. That way you can set the temperature and you don't have like, you're not going off the charts or anything like that. Especially between day and night or anything. The temperature is very important. That would conclude the main part of this unless someone had questions. I would just add at the end, most people see results like around 30 days, right? But sometimes it takes longer. It just depends on your particular lighting, the temperature you grew it at, and just the mood. They're moody like that. The thing is though, you put in the same growth medium every single time, so you have the same amount of nutrients and everything. You will have the same amount of cells. They'll just produce different amounts of carotenoids. If you leave it longer, this is really dark. You're generally not going to get them this dark after 30 days, but they're almost like a fine wine. Or if you let them sit on light for a long, long time, they'll just keep recycling nutrients that are left over from dead cells and stuff more and more efficiently. And they will get to like, we're at the bottom, it's almost like a sludge. We do, by the way, and just one more thing on with the,
sorry.
yeah, I didn't think to mention it in the thing, but we do include a thermometer now. So that, yeah, it just makes it easier to get up close, because sometimes people look at the ambient temperature and it could be very different than the internal temperature of the cube. So that's just something good to include. So.
You leave the light on 24/7?
Another good question. You can have a light cycle, but 24/7 is just fine. It seems to produce the fastest results. They don't really benefit from like a dark period, unless you're trying to do very specific things, actually. You can manipulate the intensity of the light cycle. Like if you're trying to make bioplastic out of them, for example, this is a species you can do that with. If you're trying to create different nutrients, vitamins, you can manipulate all those things, but if you just do 24-hour light cycle, you get the fastest results, and that's generally what our people want. Yeah. Everybody's experts now? Growing PNSB? Sweet. Thanks, guys.